We're going to start out first. I'll introduce our panelists. Unfortunately, we've had two panelists because of unforeseen circumstances that won't be able to be with us today, Ken Mashoff and John Hope. Combinations of emergencies, blizzards, rescheduled funerals, and others. So unfortunately, they won't be here. As long as these guys don't tell my Ken Mashoff, who's my sitting vice president, will become my president-elect next year or next week at MPPC, that we still have the best part of the program for you anyway. So with that, on the far right is Jan Hueber. Jan is a partner in Great Plains Management with his brother. He is personally involved in pork production, as well as his management company is involved in either direct or indirect control of over 40,000 sows and the management of those sows. In the center, you know Dr. Tom Burkgren. Tom is I would say the CEO. I don't know if that officially is your title, but he's my counterpart of the American Association of Swine Veterinarians. Tom's originally from Iowa. Received his degree in veterinary medicine from Iowa State University. Was in practice, mixed practice, and then went into more specific swine practice. Did some teaching at Iowa State Vet School, and then had an offer he couldn't refuse, or he had people twisting his arms, and took the position of an executive secretary of AASV. Just a side note, tremendous amounts of respect for all these panelists, particularly, and we'll probably get into some of those discussions today, of some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years with disease management, interface, and believe me, Tom Burkgren has done stellar work, and I truly appreciate it, and typically I call him and ask for directions to tell me what to do, because sometimes I get put in positions that are challenging from a science perspective. And then, certainly not least, is Bob Ruth. Bob Ruth is originally a product of Ohio. He's been involved in the animal nutrition business as well as the production business of pork production in several very interesting and dynamic ways, going back into the growth in the Carolinas in the early, or in the 80s, that developed, among other things, Prestige Family Farms the Prestige Families Farms, when they developed into the pork business from the turkey business. Bob subsequently, beyond a stint operating his own business, swine production businesses, joined the Clemens family, which for some of you don't know, you've heard the name Hatfield Quality Meats. The Clemens family is the entity that owns that. And Bob's had a number of responsibilities at the Clemens factory, including on the sales side, selling products, so that'll be an interesting dynamic as we go here. But most recently, he's the president of Country View Farms, and he's the vice president for the Clemens Group itself. So with that, that's our panel for today. And again, remember, text early and often. We're going to talk about a number of ranging areas. Generally speaking, I want to first start out as veterinarians, some discussion about the kinds of perspective these gentlemen have for your profession, how it fits, where things go. But as we go through the panel, I'd also like to expand some other things as the veterinarian, not just as the practitioner, but also as the profession, because Tom and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about this thing, talking about that issue. And I'll put forward, in fact, I saw it this morning in a news clip, a discussion about trusted sources of information as it relates to our food supply. And the two most trusted sources of information are first medical doctors and second veterinarians. And this was actually talking about a discussion with kind of the interface between those professional communities. Groups like me that I represent, we show up about 12th or 13th on the list for credibility. And with that, that's why it's so critically important that the role that veterinarians play in our industry is important. So we'll try to touch on that a little later. So without further ado, I'm going to start out with the first question. I'm going to throw it at Jan. I ask everybody to address it. That is, from your perspective, Jan, when you think about the role of veterinarians, how you interface with veterinarians, what are your expectations for the veterinary profession, for what you do in producing pork?
Yeah, we're really fortunate, I guess, with Great Plains Management. We get to work with between 7 to 12 vets. I see a bunch of guys out here right now that we work with. So we hear a lot of their perspectives of relative, same diseases and so forth on the farm. So what we look for them is fast response time, looking at it, finding out the clinical problems we have as fast as possible and giving us the tools that we need to go after them. We cover about 5 states with quite a few different farms, and we want to grow and we want to build a relationship with the veterinarians relative to the area you're at. So we just need them to be able to communicate well with us and with the staffs on the farm, and just just move as fast as we can.
Okay, a follow-up, and then I want to go to Bob next for the same question. But, okay, I'm curious about responsibilities beyond just animal health. Okay. Do you see a growing role there with your expectations, advice in different areas of production, or different perspectives you're having to contend with?
Oh, yeah, anytime questions from the production side all the way through the health side, to have that open relationship with each one of the guys we work with, to ask those questions, whatever. And really, as long as no question is one that we can't talk about. Anything we would want to ask them about any aspect of the farm, the financial ramifications of the things we're going to do. Because our goal is to take those. And what we work with is a lot of family farms. Our biggest guy is about 7,000 sows down to 1,200, and our goal is to bring the services and then create a profitable environment for those folks so that they can compete in the industry. So we look for our veterinarians for every aspect or every question we can come and work as a team, the management group, the veterinarians, and then the owners, and come up with the best solution to be profitable for those producers.
Bob, I'm curious your perspective, the role of veterinarians, as well as how you see veterinarians interfacing in other issues related to country viewpoint.
So I think the biggest change that I've seen, that our expectations out of our veterinarians, is that they're really an integral part of our overall team. And so from a communication standpoint, it's really critical that they work with the production group, obviously, with our nutritionist, and with our animal care team, and then be responsible for the health. Because, as Kent was saying, it really is more than just one issue that you're always looking at. So there's the environmental aspect of it, there's the nutritional aspect of it, there's the actual animal health aspect of it. So, we've taken the approach that we always want to try to be a solution provider, and the only way that we believe that you can be a solution provider if you're an excellent communicator, and so you're understanding the entire system versus being kind of pigeonholed in just thinking about health. You really need to look at it holistically. And so that's probably the biggest change that I've seen over the 35 years that I've been doing this, and really tending to look more for those people that want to be part of the team and help in providing solutions that may not even be an animal health solution. It may be a nutritional solution, but they've got a good input in how we need to change that to get to our goal.
Tom, what do you relay to veterinarians from the ASV's perspective?
Well, I think just to pick up on a couple of themes that both of you have mentioned, communications, responsiveness, you're talking about being a member of the team, and I've been around long enough to look at the transformations that we've seen in the industry and veterinarians' roles in systems as well as individual farms. And one of the challenges I think that we faced back in the 90s was as systems got larger, farms got larger, and they started looking at cost. And for veterinarians, they became a line item cost on the profit and loss statement. And the transformation we kind of struggled with a little bit was how do you transform yourself as a veterinarian from being seen just as a cost on that line item to creating value and creating profit for your customer. And I think the other part about the teamwork is how do you integrate yourself into the team on that farm? Sometimes cultures can be a challenge, and that's perhaps a little different than the classic role of practitioner back when I graduated in 1980. To really transform yourself into that role and almost become a partner in that farm, not a financial partner, but certainly a knowledge partner and in communications with those producers.
Thank you. Let's talk just a little bit more on the production side. For those who don't know, we're giving Jan a hard time this morning. I think he's the only panelist that's appeared on the front page of the domestic section of the New York Times. But when PED occurred, you were on the front of the domestic section of the New York Times.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about your perspective as you encountered PEDV and how you saw things working through, and obviously it was a kind of a black swan event as Kent before.
Right, and that was actually kind of interesting. Matt Ackerman called me and told me that the New York Times wanted to come into an article about PEDV, and I heard he wasn't the right person at the time because we hadn't experienced it yet. Luckily, I guess, we got to see what it was like, or if that's lucky. But it was, I took it as a good opportunity for us to bring in the folks. The New York Times generally isn't the most farm-friendly or animal-friendly. I guess they're kind of a little liberal. But it was a good, it was a good experience. It gave us a good opportunity to show those guys a sow unit and talk about what we need in the fears of a large epidemic like that, and it was interesting.
So I'm curious, beyond the interview, I'm just curious your perspective, having encountered PEDV. What went right, what went wrong, what was needed, how did you approach it, what did you see was needed?
I think actually it was pretty impressive how fast the government and the whole vet community did on evaluating what PD was. I mean, it was really something quite new. It was like a form of TGE. And pharmaceutical companies coming up with vaccines. The veterinarians helped put together biosecurity protocols, separate trucks from sow farms to finishers, like Bob and I talked about earlier. And it was a real learning experience. And we had, in the middle of it, you thought there was nothing could be worse than a PEDV break. And today, that's not. It's almost been eliminated. So I think that's real kudos to the whole vet community and what they've been able to accomplish on something that was that unique or different. So yeah, that's just like.
Well, I'm curious. I don't know the impact of PEDV in the country view system, but your observations as you dealt with that, it was a black swan event. The industry didn't expect it. What was your perspective coming from it? If you have any insights.
Well, I would tend to agree with what Jan said as far as the reaction once we got the disease, but I am still, and maybe you guys can all help, I'm still very much concerned, about how it got entered into the United States, and now we've just had Seneca Valley virus come in, and so I think we got a bigger problem that we need to be addressing, and that's how are we going to protect ourselves versus foreign animal diseases coming in. I don't know that the government, really did a lot for us, with that, during those events that were coming on. In fact, it was almost like they were frozen. And then we have not learned anything from it, which I think is a travesty, at least in my opinion, that we have not implemented one thing to protect our borders anymore since the introduction of that virus, at least not to my understanding. So, a little controversial maybe, but I think that's the bigger question we need to be asking ourselves.
Well, I didn't really expect to get into PEDV and the response this quickly, but let's go there. Tom and I spent a lot of time on this issue, and why don't you give everybody your perspective of how this whole thing went?
Where do I begin on that?
Probably starting when we asked the question of USDA, what are they going to do?
And USDA's response was, first response was, we'll get back to you tomorrow. And that morning then, or the next morning, they came back and said, we're here to help you. What do you want us to do? And it was not the response that we expected. When we did ask them to do some things, they didn't do it. Back to your your comment as far as how the virus got in. But I think the positive thing was that, and every day I was grateful for, was that we had an industry that was fairly united as far as National Pork Board, National Pork Producers Council, and AASV. It did throw the associations into some new roles, especially for AASV. You know, AASV is not a regulatory agency. We don't have control of the veterinarians out there. You know, the veterinarians, I work for the veterinarians. They're my bosses. But, you know, we had multiple conference calls starting on that Thursday back in 2013. And I was really glad that we had the support, and we had veterinarians on staff with the other two, with the producer organizations. At one time, Liz Wagstrom, the chief veterinarian for NPPC, was working out of the ASV office for a couple weeks, actually. But it was a frustrating realization that our U.S. government. Are there any USDA employees in here? Because I'm going to apologize to you right up front. And I've pretty much pissed off everybody at the USDA over the last 3 years. And I will continue to do that because that's my job. The first lesson we learned was we're not going to be able to rely on our government to protect us as an industry. We learned that on pretty much by Friday morning of that dreadful week when we had the PED diagnosis. The good news was the diagnosticians stepped up. Kent Schwartz was on the front line there. The university, the researchers really came together. They got their PCRs, the primers. They started looking at how to diagnose. Veterinarians in the field started looking at control measures. I can remember one evening, I was actually sitting on a skid loader moving snow out of our driveway and had a call from a reporter wanting to know about feedback. Why are you feeding dead pigs to other pigs? And it was about an hour and a half conversation, but by the end of that, she understood what we were doing and what we were facing, the magnitude of what we were facing. So from an industry standpoint, it was a very positive working together. From the government standpoint, it's been extremely disappointing, and it continues to be extremely disappointing to me that we're paying good tax money for the USDA to basically sit on their asses for 3 years. Scott D is doing some good work on how the virus could have got in. And I remember the first feed investigation that we finally pushed USDA into doing with FDA, they found negative results on PED. They couldn't find PED in the feed. And the very high-ranking veterinarian, the USDA, said, don't worry about the feed. We're not going to spend any more money on feed investigations. That's really pouring money down a rat hole. It's not the feed. Well, since then, I believe we moved a lot of PED around in the feed. And from the work that K-State's done, once you got PED into a mill, it's everywhere in the mill. And we know the infected dose is very low. And it's a challenge. But I agree as far as USDA not stepping up. The industry stepped up. The Pork Board came up $15 million to form up the Swine Health Information Center. And I think that's a step forward, but it's still been a frustrating experience.
Why don't you explain the Swine Health Information Center quick, what it's going to do? Yeah,
the Swine Health Information Center, staffed by Executive Director Paul Sundberg, formerly from National Pork Board, is designed to go out there and look and to see what viruses are out there in other countries, to gather as much information. The ASV Swine Health Committee did a priority matrix on viruses that infect swine but are not present in the United States, although since then we found some of those viruses actually are present in the United States. They prioritized a list started with 30 pathogens. Now I think it's over 60. And they're going to prioritize those, put money into research through the Swine Health Information Center to look at those, and hopefully it's not going to necessarily prevent the next virus from coming in, but hopefully we'll be able to start with more information, not from zero information about the virus, if and when it does get here.
Okay. And a reminder, Tom, there's nobody here from USDA, but there is the media in the room. So all I'd ask is be gentle, please.
Neil,
Not to you. I'm talking to the media.
Nothing I say is going to surprise anybody at USDA because I've said it to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not surprising me. That's why I kind of led you to.
So it's, you can be as
In fact,
hard on
last
me.
week, Tom dropped some stuff up by your office, and he was talking to one of my staffers in the parking lot, and I yelled out the window at him and say, hey, quit trying to talk to our staff to come work for you for nothing. So, but no, we were.
I'm sorry I brought it up, but
no.
But it really in coming back to that, we're only one disease break away from a major disaster here in the United States, and we've got to do a better job of understanding those risks, but more importantly, doing something about it.
One of the things spurred my time. I mean, I think I can tell everybody this. One of the issues was the government showed up a year later with funds that would for diagnostics, for testing, as well as for biosecurity practices, reimbursement for producers, which I'd say from the producer organization standpoint, the good biosecurity practices were going on anyway, and there was question by the producers of why should they be reimbursed, why not let the testing go on further. Well, those funds they were announced in June of 14, and they aren't specific to a budget. They're going to continue on. They continue through the fiscal year, the government. But we're getting to the point, we were told yesterday morning on a call, the estimate is that there will be enough funds for testing, for reimbursement of test costs through April. And at that juncture, the funds are gone. Now MPPC, and I'm not trying to be a panelist here, I'm just trying to get some information. MPPC has asked, and ASB is supportive of it, we're trying to get $10 million for future testing because we believe, as we take a look at monitoring, what do we know? If it hadn't been for a veterinarian that said, this isn't what we thought it was, and after the second or third test, we had something else going on, this whole concept, and as Tom said, one of the things that's happened is that maybe our response times still need a lot of work, but just the sheer fact that one of the biggest things you need in a deal like this is to cut down the times to know what's going on. And as Tom said, Kent was on the front line of that. Others at the diagnostic labs that did a stellar job. So, excuse me, I'll move on to another issue. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the chain itself. Oh, good. Well, let me look at these. Well, let's stay on PEDV for a second. And that is, Jan, Bob, what has PEDV and Seneca Valley virus done to change your biosecurity practice?
You want to start?
Okay, well, Seneca Valley, we just had our first experience with Seneca Valley, and just to heighten that level of what comes and goes from the farm. We know we have the disinfectant chambers, make sure that we don't have any trucks come to the farms that have ever been to a packing house. Isolate them if we can. Ours is a little different because we have their family farm operations. Sometimes those guys can't have extra designated trailers, but we need to move that direction. The Danish entry into the showers, which all these things are kind of common sense when you look back at it, but they're all those things have elevated that whole awareness from our employees, our owners, and ourselves. We just need to make sure we don't track anything into the facilities.
So is your biosecurity better today than it was prior to the PEDV?
Considerably better. Yeah, it still needs to get better. We still have breaches. We have trucks that show up that really shouldn't be there, and there's some challenges where we can't make, from Great Plains Management can't make that decision. No, you can't bring your truck to your farm because we don't think it's clean. Now that gets to be kind of a political act, to encourage you not to do something that we think maybe isn't right, and vice versa, And then we look to all the veterinarians we work with to help us carry that message and then educate us as a management group. We're not vets. We want to be taught, taught, and we have those communications about how to improve those biosecurity rules.
Bob, any comments about biosecurity?
We'd already separated out our hauling for PERS, but we did a lot around team member and visitor visitation, different changes around that. So we put in the benches at all of our farms where you took your shoes off. We actually started a booty policy that you had to wear boots to come into the farm and then take your shoes off and flip over the bench to get to the clean side. We did that all on all of our farms, which was rather costly because of the change to the facilities because they weren't designed that way. So we did that, and then we really did a lot of work at the plant as well in swabbing, trying to understand whether we were exposed in the plant, and if we were, what areas were being exposed. We did a lot of swabbing of not only our trucks, but all of our supplier trucks to determine positive trucks, negative trucks. We had a positive flow going into the plant, and we were able to try to contain it, to that unloading chute, where we just unloaded the pigs and really minimize the spread of it through the plant. And so we felt pretty good about, some of those things that we did too. So, and just a lot more heightened awareness, as far as traffic to the farms.
Okay.
We also, I guess, Neil, one more thing on that. Our commercial feed mill, we feed quite a few sows out of that mill, some of our farms plus a bunch of our clients' farms. So we ended up making sure, and in that group, that our whole Northern community, like a lot of units have done, have that where we all talk to each other and what's going on. So we knew where problem farms were, whether it's PED or PERS break. We ended up implementing, like if we had a trouble farm, isolate that truck, it would only go there. If it was a PED farm, it would go there, and then have to wash, and maybe only go to finishers, it could go to other sow farms. So yeah, that changed our protocols dramatically at the feed mill, carrying antifreeze with disinfectants to spray tires, even on a routine basis, booties on the truck drivers, watching, like on a PD farm, we'd have that line where we wanted to have the guys at the farm open the bin lids so our truck drivers wouldn't have to go over bin lids. So yeah, all those things were really heightened in terms of, from our management company and from our feed manufacturing side, of the appropriate things to do. And like I said, we did all that with the things we'd read and in our interactions with our veterinarians.
Yeah, so let me piggyback on that as well, because I forgot the feed component of it. Praise the Lord, our nutritionalists had already identified, and this was what I was talking about earlier as far as being part of the solution and really being a solution provider. David Funderburk does our nutritional work, and he was very suspect of a lot of the minerals and vitamins that were coming over from China. And so we got away from those like 3 or 4 years before PED came about. And so, whether I have firm proof on that or not, we did not have any. And so, it was, again, David was proactive, and thank goodness he was.
Okay, just real quick, and then we're going to... Hello? Just real quick, before we move away from this specific area, Seneca Valley. Any comments about Seneca Valley? Antemortem inspections, any problems in your plant? Maybe you didn't see any show up. Did you have any comments? Tom, I'd like your perspective.
Yeah, we have not seen any. Our team does a great job of being, again, proactive and really looking for stuff. So we've had a couple kind of holds happen when we've seen some abrasions and different things like that. But with the testing, nothing positive, and not at the plant either.
Tom, you want to talk about Seneca Valley and FSIS?
Again, that was an exercise in dealing with government agencies when Seneca Valley virus especially showed up at a packing plant. And certainly we don't want to be responsible for letting the first case of foot and mouth disease not go diagnosed, but it was also a balance of how do you talk somebody off the ledge from pushing the red button and shutting down the line and stopping trucks on the road and all of that. And for the most part, it worked pretty well. And one thing that we found was the role of the state veterinarian in dealing with FSIS. We as veterinarians don't always get a lot of exposure with the FSIS inspectors in the plants. What we found, especially in Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, the state veterinarian had a relationship and at least knew who the supervisors were and who to talk to, and so there was some thought process put into, okay, when we see blisters show up, what are we going to do? They were prepared for it for the most part, and they took the appropriate action. Luckily, no FMD, just SVV. But one of the challenges is understanding how SVV is moving around. It used to be, years ago, it was a show pig problem more. But now that we're seeing it in more of the production settings, but again, it emphasizes we need to communicate and cooperate with the people at the plants. And, you talk to producers that loaded those pigs, and the challenges of, 4 a.m. loads, and you see a lame pig, you don't think about it. You don't think about having an ulcer between the digits. That was another education process I think the producers' organizations did pretty well, was emphasizing if you see a lame pig, you better pick up that hoof and take a look between the toes.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to another topic, and Jan, you get to be the first responder. And this came from the audience. What are your thoughts of antimicrobial stewardship as it reports, excuse me, boy, I'm having a hard time. My mouse won't work. What are your thoughts on antimicrobial stewardship as it relates to pork production? Now, there's a broad topic for you. Bob, you want to go first?
Sure. Every pound of pork that we produce is antibiotic-free. We abide by all withdraws. And so that's the first thing. We actually have an antibiotic-free flow. And those are the first words that always come out of my mouth whenever I'm doing a customer visit about antibiotics, is that every pound of pork that comes from our plant is antibiotic-free. And we do residue testing, so we know that to be a fact as well. So now, if you want to buy a product where the pig's never been introduced to antibiotics, we've got that for you as well, and we'd be happy to sell it to you.
Jed?
I didn't hear you quite correctly. Antibiotic-free, fortunately, I guess, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was part of a company, we did antibiotic-free pork. Way back on the bleeding edge where we used copper sulfate to get growth and biomass. Other than that, we just ended up with really a lot of sick, dead, and morbidity. So, and it was always hard at that time. I remember I was telling Bob, being in headquarters for Wild Oats or out in California at Whole Foods back in 2000, to sit there and I always talked about that the products are safe anyway. If you want to pay extra for a product that's never been introduced to antibiotics, that's fine. But I never subscribed to the fact that it's bad for you. And I still don't think it is. It's just.
So stewardship is a good word to use around this. And I was talking to Jan earlier. One of the things that we have done, and we try to communicate it to all of our customers and our stakeholders and everybody that works with us, is our definition of animal care. And we have a definition of animal care, and that's how we do our business. Our definition is that we're every year improving livability of the animals. Every year we're improving the injury rate, because people don't understand morbidity, so we talk about injury rate. Every year we use less antibiotics. And then our performance factors, feed conversion, pigs born alive, pigs weaned, daily gains, and all of those performance metrics. Let's face it, I think we've kind of lost the high ground as far as our ability to talk to the public about these things. And, we're farmers at heart, and who better should know, how to take good care of animals than us. So part of our overall animal care program is using less antibiotics for a number of different reasons. Number one is that if you use antibiotics, what's that mean? Come on, vets. What's that mean if you've got to use antibiotics? Exactly. Do we want sick pigs? Do you want sick pigs? Absolutely not. So it's something that we've got to do and continue to improve, each and every year, because that's what we do as farmers. So it's part of a stewardship program, but it's not only that, it's really how we define animal care and how we conduct our business. And we've got to let the public know that. I mean, goodness gracious, it's kind of crazy that we've lost, the argument about this when it's each and one of our jobs to do that, right? So that's...
Yeah, and I think we need the education of the public. I think that's really important for whatever community that is, the vet community, to make sure these people understand, or go talk to the folks that are asking for antibiotic-free, never ever pork or whatever, to understand that if you're willing to pay more, that's fine, but it is still safe, and that we, as an industry, we don't, like you said, Bob, we don't use antibiotics because it costs more money, and we don't need to do that. We want a safe product. We're eating it ourselves. We make sure those people understand that they should be a science-based decision to eat antibiotic-free pork versus emotion. I sat, and I was telling Bob, I think it was 2002, I sat at the Protein Vendor Symposium for Whole Foods, and the guy on the panel says to me, we're talking in the group, he said, well, my daughter in high school thinks you should raise pigs like this. And I said, well, why? He goes, well, that's the way you should do it. I said, does that mean she has no idea how to raise hogs or what to do? Should I be the guy, when I go to fly tomorrow, that I check the checklist on the jet? Because I know more about making sure that jet engine's safe than that technician. The answer is no. So I think we need to educate those people that there are a lot of myths and a lot of emotion about antibiotic-free that should be, if they want to buy it, that's fine. Bob, you're doing it. I've got some farms that are going to be antibiotic-free now again, too. But we need to make sure those people have an educated reason why they want to do that.
I'd like to come back a little bit about this, the signals to the chain, but before we get to that point, one of the big things that's out there, veterinary feed directive comes into effect for producers January 1 of this coming year. I'm just curious, what are you guys doing in your operations to prepare for it, for the veterinary feed directive? FSMA's also, we have FSMA coming along also. Anything in particular, or any advice you give to the veterinarians?
I just think we have situations, just communication, but with most of our farms, our veterinarians are real close, like Max and RC and so forth, that we can move pretty quickly. Just keeping communications at the utmost. I guess if the VFDs stepping back are going to make our consumer more comfortable, that everything's not going to be used unless a veterinarian actually looks at it, diagnoses it, and we treat because of it. Even if it could be complicated, there's going to be a lot of paperwork, but if that improves and enhances more product being marketed, if our per capita intake of pork goes up because they feel better about it, I guess it's all well worth it.
So Jessica's working very hard around the processes and the paperwork, but we're already a lot further along than probably most, because we quit using growth promotants in 2007, and Jessica's been trying to wean us off of the human important antibiotics and those sorts of things. So she's done a really nice job of preparing us for this.
Well, here's an appropriate one. How does Country View measure antibiotic use?
Well, we measure it in not only in dollars, but in usage, of feed meds and then injectables and those sorts of things. So it's a dual measurement that Jessica is responsible for, making sure that we're actually using less antibiotics every year. It's a good question.
Tom, you want to make any comments to that? Effect on measurement?
Yeah, I think measurement is perhaps one of the riskier things that we're looking at from the future. Measurement not only but on individual farms, but as an industry. And there's one reason right now we don't have measurement being pushed by the FDA is they have no infrastructure for it. My fear is that it'll be misused. No matter how many kilograms we use, it's going to be too much. And it goes back to the definition of stewardship. You've got to understand that there are those within the FDA and certainly within some of the anti-agriculture activist groups that stewardship is really no use at all. And I harken back to a conversation I had a couple years ago with a sustainability officer with a large fast food chain. And I spent about an hour and a half trying to educate her about what we do as veterinarians on the farm, how we use antibiotics, and got to the end of the conversation. I said, do you have any questions? She said, well, but I just want to tell you, we're not against you treating sick pigs. We just don't want to buy that meat. You know, you can treat all the pigs you want, but we're not going to buy that meat. And so, talking about wasted hour and a half of my life that I'll never get back again. The other concept of sustainability officers, that young woman, I think she was probably in her late 20s, maybe she was in her 30s. She was in that position for about a year, and now she's moved on. I think she's had 2 different positions in that company. And so every year you're turning over people who have different definitions of what stewardship is. But measuring antibiotic use on the farm is going to be difficult for the industry, I think, going forward, if we're expected to come up with a number. And that's what really FDA wants, is give us a number. And you all know what they're going to do with that number. Next year it's got to be lower. I guarantee you that right now. Whatever number we come up with, if it's high, low, whatever it is, 2 things. It's not going to be accurate, and they're going to tell you it's got to be lower.
And I just add that Dr. Peter Davies from the University of Minnesota is on sabbatical under a grant from the National Pork Board. He's actually officing in the MPPC office in Washington. And he's attempting to explore how do you deal with this measurement question. Some people say, what, average daily application or dose or whatever. It's very problematic, but Tom's exactly right. You know, the reason they want that, and there's a push on now, is the government, and particularly the activists, want it so they can see what it is now. And then let's see what happens after January 1 when the 209, 213 VFD go into effect. So it's going to be an issue for a while. Bob, I'd like to go back to antibiotics, but from a different angle here. What kinds of signals are coming through from the consumers and the people you're doing business with as it relates to not just antibiotic usage, but what other kinds of characteristics or what other kinds of demands do you see coming through the chain that are going to impact everybody in the chain?
Gosh, thanks for that question. Well, it's a segmented marketplace. So from the standpoint of thinking that everybody wants antibiotic-free, that's absolutely not true at all. So you've got to be able to segment your business to address the people that want something, okay? Because it's one of the reasons that I start my conversation off with customers the way that I do, because there is a big marketplace for the responsible use of antibiotics. So I hope that answers that question about antibiotics. I think people really want to know that we care. So it is critical that the entire industry becomes more transparent in what we do and are not closed-minded about anything. We've had a much longer journey than most people in the open pen gestation arena. We started back in 2004 testing the concept, and in 2007 decided that all of our farms, new farms and transition farms would go that way. And we have gained a lot of trust with a lot of our customers by just, being more transparent about what we do and how we do things. But there are limits, as Jan and I were talking about. There are things when a customer comes to us and says, I want this, we say, no, we're not going to do that, but we always give them a reason why we don't do it, other than just, no, you can't do that. Again, it's being a solution provider. Like I said at the beginning of my presentation, I can't emphasize that enough, is that you listen to what your customer wants, and then you provide solutions to help make them more money and make their lives easier. So again, it's a very segmented market out there, and you can't say one size fits all, and that's a danger we all get into. It's this antibiotic thing is that, we think everybody wants it, when in reality they don't. I mean, only a small, again, it's more of a niche type market is demanding this, and so the business will figure out how to get it to them.
Jim?
Marketing perspective, antibiotic-free, maybe it'll do some things. I think your average, I look at it, the total market access for pork. The guys that eat a lot of pork, like me, you can see it. Neil, you probably eat a little bit of pork too. If we can go antibiotic-free or large pen, the ESF stations, and crates that open up, maybe that's going to, the market segment of the millennials that are going to say, that are not eating that much pork per capita, but they're going to, when Bob raises those pigs that way, they're going to be the ones that's like, wow, feels making pigs like that, and I'm thinking we need more pork. So all those things, maybe those segments will, raise the bar, raise the level for everybody. All ships raise in a really tight. So I think maybe that'll accomplish that, because I think our traditional pork eaters are going to continue to eat what they ever ate, and that's just a segment. It's just a segment.
So can I say one other thing about that? So I'm always accused of being the eternal optimist, so excuse my optimism. But I've had very detailed conversations with customers about how we produce our antibiotic-free pigs. And so I tell them, and really in our system, we've got a pretty high health status, so all of our pigs start off antibiotic-free, and then, if they get sick, then we treat them. But we've got a specific flow for antibiotics, because you've got to really segregate and make sure that from an audit standpoint you can prove that the pigs don't get back into the flow. So anyway, to finish my story, so when I explain to them that we treat the sick pigs, we move them out, we segregate them, and then they're not marketed with the rest of the pigs. And so I've had a couple, pretty smart customers say, so you treat the pigs, you move it out. What happens when the pig gets better? Well, when the pig gets better, nothing. We still don't medicate it or anything else. And they say, well, do you mean to tell me then that if you would move it back in, it probably wouldn't have any more antibiotics, and I'm paying you, because, we charge quite a bit for this, and I'm paying you that much money to segregate it and keep it away from the rest of the pigs? And you can see the mind starting to click, thinking, gosh, why am I going through all this just to get that? So my point is that I'm optimistic that maybe this thing will come full circle someday, and people will figure out that every pound that we give them anyway is safe.
All right. Well, continuing kind of down that line of thought, there's a question, and this wouldn't necessarily what it talks about. What technology must the swine industry implement in the next 5 years to gain better, stronger pork demand in the U.S.? And I would broaden that to say, maybe it isn't about better, stronger pork demand. Maybe it's about herd health or something else. What kind of technologies do you think we need?
Now you've opened up a real can of worms. As Neil said, I spent 5 to 6 years with the food group on the sales side, building the solution cultures and also trying to challenge the team to think differently about pork sales. So, I'm not really sure that we need to do anything else, because more pork, more efficient pork, it doesn't do us any good unless we can sell it, right? It just adds to our woes. I mean, and we're doing a wonderful job as far as efficiency in the pig business, aren't we, Jan? It's amazing how efficient we are nowadays in production. What we need to do, though, is we need to figure out how to take undervalued cuts of meat and turn them into desirable products that people want to eat to help food service operators and retailers make more money than our nemesis, who is the chicken. Okay? The chicken boys have kicked us around for the last 25 years, and it's about time that we get some retribution back to those people. And we've had some success at the food group by doing that, taking the cushion muscle out of the ham and making a strip steak and different things like that. So we got to innovate more, and we got to make desirable products and help our customers make more money.
Okay. Let me ask the question then from your production background. What kind of technologies do you see that are needed on the production side, the hard production side, that wouldn't interfere on the production or on the product marketing side?
Man, I tell you, it's amazing. We're coming up with new technology every day. So I think, just my bias, we just need to keep doing what we're doing. Because when you take a new technology that we've just adopted over the last several years is the deep uterine insemination that we picked up from our European friends. And of course that gives us the opportunity to double down on bores again. So now instead of one bore for every 250, it's one bore for every 500, which is going to drive even, better performance, because now we can select, even higher indexing males and put them across more females. So I really do believe, from a genetic standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, from ventilation equipment, all of the technology that's being driven right now, we can produce enough pork. We just got to sell more of it.
Just a quick one. What about the animal health side?
Animal health side?
Well, we've had PRRS outbreaks this year. I mean, we continue to have PRRS outbreaks.
It would be really nice to figure PRRS out. But, Jessica tells me right now it's a long way away. But I think, again, if I was to say one thing to Ceva, it would be nice to look at vaccine delivery systems that would ease, our ability to vaccinate our animals. We use a lot of vaccines instead of antibiotics because we found that to be a good strategy. But it's still a little cumbersome, as Kent was talking about. Do you get the right injection in and that sort of thing? So if we could figure out, a better delivery system that assures that we get vaccination across all of our animals, that would be pretty cool.
Jan, what are you thinking of new technologies that are needed?
Yeah, like PRRS technologies. Anytime that can be improved, it just seems like we haven't really moved the needle that much. I mean, we still end up having, I think, biosecurity going up the last 2 years because of the advent of PEDV really improved us in that way. But just for us to be able to, even if we have the PRRS break, whatever technology is, to shut that virus down faster, allow us to go back negative sooner. And I look to this group to be able to do that. But any of those things, whether it's modified lives or killed strategies or whatever that is, something to help us get that production back online and the farm's profitable.
So Neil, just to give you a fact, coming back to what Kent said, so let's give facts, around what we're talking about. When I look at our performance today, I almost have to pinch myself to believe that we're getting the performance that we are out of our animals. When I look at the top 10% of our finishing animals, we are getting very close to having the daily gain match the feed conversion. Our top 10% of our closeouts were like 215, 216 daily gain with a 226 feed conversion. I mean, it's amazing what our animals are able to do today. So that's why I say I'm not as concerned about the productivity and the production side of it, because what I'm seeing as I am about the ability to sell the crazy stuff.
Tom, comments about technology you see coming down the road? What about we had one earlier talked about, what about whether it is soft technology from a management system or hard technology from a product standpoint? What kind of obstacles are we seeing with technology introduction into the industry?
Well, certainly cost becomes an issue. If pork prices are low, technology doesn't get instituted. I think we got to remember we're still in the people business. It's people delivering technology, and when I remember in practice talking with a producer who had a vaccination crew, and he was having some what he thought was breakthrough the vaccine, and you start looking at how they were vaccinating, and they were vaccinating about every fourth pig. And you talk to them, and they said, well, that's just the way we do it. And so there's still that training issue comes in with delivery of the technology. I think for veterinarians, from the standpoint of what we're going to be facing in the future from a regulatory standpoint, information management technology is going to be important. How do we keep up with documentation of what we're doing? That's a whole new realm, I think, for veterinarians with this VFD coming down the pike. That's going to be another D we're going to add to the process. Certainly vaccinology, we're going to be able, if we start losing products, and I guarantee you we're going to lose products through the VFD process. Not all those products are going to be translated over to a VFD. So we better understand that. We've got some, Chris Chase is here, I think, somewhere talking about vaccinology and how to get an effective vaccine at a cost-effective rate.
Okay, so you told me this once. Once we get this VFD implemented next January, then everything's solved, right?
No, you're lying now. I would never say that. No.
Yeah, you didn't tell me about that. But I had a question that kind of relates to that. It goes to it. With regards to the VFD, what's your definition of increased veterinary oversight? I mean, coming from the regulators, what do you see that way? And I'll just say, again, earlier in my comments, and we're guilty from an MPPC perspective, and Tom and I have had many conversations about this. Look, we want veterinarians to be successful. You are respected spokespeople. Now, there's a lot of challenges I'd like to get to if we have time about that, but the point comes, we got a lot of people that are saying, well, to Bob's point, going to be more transparency, more things going on. How do you see that playing out for the vet?
I'm not going to give a definition of increased oversight because I think the basics of being a veterinarian are still the same now. I had a clinician when I was in vet school talked about the D's of being a veterinarian, and it's about diagnosis, it's about selection of the right drug, the right dosage, delivery system, the duration. We got to add a D on the end is the documentation part of what you're doing, but the basics are still in place. And when we start talking about, veterinary client-patient relationship, at the one end of the spectrum are the windshield veterinarians that pull onto a place and look through the windshield and say, well, I've been here, this is my VCPR. That's not a VCPR. That's not veterinary oversight. That's just an economic engine for somebody to fund their retirement. I think you've got to know the pigs. Either you've seen the pigs or you've been in the building. I don't think you can really realistically say you know a building until you've been into it. Again, the people part, it's not just the building, it's the people that are maintaining the building, taking care of the pigs. You have to have an understanding. When I was in practice, I had clients that if I was on their farm once a year, I knew when I was back a year later, things would be the same. And I had other clients where they were turning people over every 3 months, and I wouldn't give them a prescription for longer than 3 months because I knew something would change on that farm. But I think oversight is still a basic concept that we all understand, and I don't want to see veterinarians just become VFD machines for whatever farm they're working on. If that's the expectation of the client, as a veterinarian, I'm not sure I'd want to be that veterinarian for that client. I think we need to take our oath seriously. We have taken an oath to protect animal health, and just generating VFDs is not the way to do it.
Okay, so there's going to be there will be more, maybe different workload for veterinarians ahead because of things coming through regulatorily or whatever. So, and we talked a little bit about this, but a question we had is what have been the most effective ways to keep vets in communication chain of all aspects of production? You talked a little bit about it, Bob, earlier. Anything you want to add? And Jan, anything you want to add?
Oh, I think to make sure that the veterinary, the communications between the owner and the people at the barns and so forth, so that they communicate their thoughts on the health of the pig, the way they're being treated, the environment they're in. And communication is important, whether it be with your vet-client relationship or your spouse. I mean, the more communications you can have, and the more good dialect you have, I think it's going to be a better situation for everybody. And our consumer, hopefully, will see that too. And
so, what are the most effective ways you've seen it? Is it every Monday morning, or is it joint visit? You take a ride with the vet and make some visits?
We've done, a year ago we did very few conference calls. Nowadays we do them almost daily, it seems about weekly. So I think those are good ways to do it. If there's any issues, have a conference call. You know, our vets are all on our farms very regularly anyway, but even to continue to move that level of communications of what they see and what their expectations are, and what our expectations are to them too. You know, how fast we'd like to have them move. In some, you know, some you like to see things move quicker, and some of the guys move really fast. But that bar's raising down too.
Bob,
So we use a three-prong approach. And first is training, making sure that our veterinarian is giving good, solid training to our team members, showing them the diagnostics and those sorts of things. Like I said, it was team members that picked out the potential Seneca Valley, because they saw it based on the training that Jessica was given. Secondly, then would be we have weekly what we call level 10 meetings where we're covering all of the aspects of the operation. So Jessica takes part in that, listening to what's going on, so she's got a global understanding of the herd health status. Then lastly would be farm visits, and she makes a quarterly farm visit on every farm that we've got, even our finishing floors, to make sure, coming back to what you were saying about the management and those sorts of things.
Okay. Any other?
Well, with a farm that had a PRRS break, and the attending veterinarian is doing a fabulous job, but then there's also a consulting vet that comes in there. We've had multiple conference calls about strategies, and as we keep doing the blood work and finding out what it is, and if we want to go back in and we go back with live virus inoculation and the ISOs. But those have been really good when we had the collaboration of a couple different guys, the owners of the farm and then us as a management group, and jointly make that decision about the direction we're going to go to take the PRRS out of that farm.
Traditionally, veterinarians have been learned advisors to the producer. I'm curious, when you have those calls, is it all about animal health, or does your consulting vet or your vet that's the attending vet, they sharing other perspectives that can be a benefit to the operation besides just the animal health side, either from
it depends. I think what it works really nice is we're lucky enough to work with so many different good veterinarians, and for everybody, I guess one thing for everybody to think about, if us as a management group, we're not vets, but we do see what you've done on a farm or what Max has done on the farm. Those things we see really successful, to talk about that and say, what do you think of this? So that everybody keeps open-minded and doesn't become jealous or whatever that is of us bringing up somebody else's thoughts or ideas. And generally speaking, the best operations we have are the ones where those guys are really open-minded. We can talk frankly about, well, we saw Dr. Wagner do this up in northwest Iowa, and then we think through those things. So for us, and we're all these small 3,000, 5,000 cell farms producers, but they're all farmer-owned, is to have that really open interaction of what's successful, what's successful, and sometimes that doesn't pertain relative to the region, but I think those work good.
So we've folded animal care underneath our vet services. So now we actually say animal health and care director. And I think that's a great spot, coming back to, the trust level of consumers and customers. They like seeing that underneath vet. That's another D that we've got, though. So we've got to have, more vets to take care of those communication and the animal health and the care. So.
Okay.
So we started working with Aaron on a farm in Northern Illinois, and already I could see, as he talked to our service person, Donna, the communication that he's going to send the reports back to us, and we're going to, from our perspective, that's excellent. That's always at the utmost. That any thoughts or any ideas or any diagnostic work comes back in, and we all talk about it. It works as a team, really.
Okay. Well, we're rapidly running towards our deadline, but there's a couple things I'd like. Bob, this is a follow-up to an earlier discussion with your comments on the porous nature of our disease border, and what are your recommendations to shore up those risks?
I have no solution. I'm leaving it up to the experts to do that. But I've had a couple meetings with, USDA people and have kind of asked them, and I can sympathize with you because it's kind of a blank stare on, what are we going to do? So worries are big ones about, okay, so you're always going to have problems. You can't get away from them. But the important thing is, what are you going to do to stop the problem, or to make it better next time? And that's the only thing that I'm a little concerned about. And you guys know better than I, but the question hasn't been asked on how we can do things better. And I'm not talking from an industry standpoint. I know we have. But I don't think the government's done a thing to think through this at all. And they're the ones that really control it. We've got, no authority to do anything. So that scares me.
Tom, anything you want to add on that?
Well, it should scare you. I think one of the things that, as an industry, there can be some pressure put on suppliers to understand quality control, where the product's coming from. And I've never been to China, but Harry Snelson was in China, and I've talked to other people that work there a lot. And it's kind of a country of extremes. On one hand, they're spreading out grain on country to city roads to dry, and then they sweep it up and they sell it to a consolidator who sells it to another consolidator. And early on in PED, we were told that there was no soybean meal imported from China in the United States. Well, a year later, we found out that wasn't true because they were importing organic soybean meal in the United States. Well, organic means that those crops were probably raised without commercial fertilizer. So what did they use? They used animal fertilizer or human fertilizer. At one time there was two carloads of soybean meal sitting on a side rail up in northwest Iowa that we knew about, and the government really didn't know it was there. And so, I think suppliers have a role in the industry to, if your supplier can't tell you where their product's coming from, maybe you should find a different supplier if you can.
Well, that's a great point. And you speak with your pocketbook. And that's what we chose to do, by getting away. And I would just encourage, sometimes the cheapest is not the cheapest.
I would just add to this morning, MPPC testified in front of Congress, had Bobby Acord, who works with us, who's the former administrator of the Animal Health Plant Inspection Service, presented to the Homeland Security Committee because, food security is one of the 6 pillars of our Homeland Security strategy. But just on that topic, I'll add, his testimony included we need a sufficient quantity of vaccine to control and eradicate an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. It's a big thing we've been pushing lately. We need a more robust system on that. A more robust review of biosecurity measures in each sector of the agricultural industry. That was one thing. I talked to a pork producer that was also a turkey producer last spring, and I said, okay, I'm just curious, what's the biosecurity like in turkey versus pork? And he said, they're in different planets. 2 weeks ago, I talked to his nephew, and he said, they're really more like in different galaxies. So we all can learn, I guess. That the pork happened to be the better one, I guess. More vigorous scrutiny of imports at ports of entry, and we don't have specific recommendations, but one of the things is, so you know, and it also gets into inspections overseas in markets. I think FDA told us they had one inspector in China in charge of inspecting products that are produced there, sent here, as it relates to animal inputs. Inspections at our ports, folks, are not like what you'd think. They're not, open the container, go in and pull the 27th bag, open it up, and do an essay of it. It's like, let me see your bill of lading. Is it in order? Okay, move it on. And that's, we do have ways to go. Also, an animal identification system better trace the movement of livestock to control the spread of disease, to determine the origins of an outbreak. More funding for the systems that safeguard U.S. agriculture. I think everybody in this room knows this, but we've been dwarfed by human science versus agricultural science, even though we make such a contribution to mankind. And sharing data, including animal movements, to improve disease response. That's what MPPC is saying. I'm very short here. Just here's the lightning round. Bob, what kind of food labeling would you expect to see coming from either the U.S. or from states in the next 2 years? You'll see GMO labeling passed on the national level that's voluntary. Is it going to be mandatory? It's going to find its way to meat industry?
That's a good question. I really can't answer that. I've been out of the food side of it for a while. So I don't know. I can't answer that.
This is for both Bob and Jan. How can the industry involve customers early in production practice discussion, and should we?
I think that'd be a great idea to do that. And Robbie Brenneman spoke up in Wisconsin last year, and he talked about inviting everybody to his farm, and that it's a cop-out if you say it's biosecurity, because those people have never been anywhere. So I think he was absolutely dead on that we need to bring people to our farms. Just like, I'm going to go back to that when the New York Times came to a farm, it was really the best thing we could have done, and those people were very, and you said it too, Bob, anytime you get anybody into these farms, whether they're crated farms and or large pens, we have those ESF stations, they're always really impressed. They're amazed. First off, they have to shower, to come in and shower, to go out, and they have to wear different clothes. They have no idea. They think of it, guys with just bib overalls slopping through the crap. And so I think that we need to invite any consumer and all the food store, the grocery stores, everything, to go to the farms and go see how we raise our hog.
Okay. How many comments on those two?
Well, I just say a few years ago we had an opportunity to take a medical doctor from the CDC onto a farm, and he was amazed too that he had to shower in and that he was on the dirty side. He had a hard time understanding dirty versus clean side for us, so he had to reverse his psychology. But he was amazed at the biosecurity on that farm. And about 2 years later, I was in a meeting where he was speaking, and he referenced that farm, and he said, it was all medical doctors in attendance. He said, you all should go to a swine farm, and you could learn about good biosecurity. It's washing your hands before you touch a patient. And he was very complimentary of the industry.
I bet there's probably a lot of our pig farms that are cleaner than some of these kitchens on some of these back streets, and here we're going to go eat. So
it's better not to know how your food is prepared.
Something you don't want to know.
All right. Next lightning round question. How long until antibiotic prevention labels come under further regulatory and or legislative pressure? Any comments?
They're firmly in the sights. If you talk to the activists, you look at their agendas on antibiotics, prevention use is clearly in the sights. We're seeing pressure come from Europe now on prevention uses. It's an incremental strategy that they use, and prevention is the next increment once they get rid of production uses.
And that occurred the day after they announced the 209, 213, and the VFD. First thing that was said was, well, this isn't enough. We need to take everything away. There's a group of individuals that are trying to take all the tools away, just philosophical that's there. Tom, I just want to take what I'm going to do is make a couple comments. I want you to respond. Then I'm going to give you two guys whatever time you want to make a comment on. I talked earlier about veterinarians as a profession, but also the issue of last week we saw Louise Slaughter drop a bill would bring further requirements on the ethics of the profession and actually create a system to report up through HHS, the Health and Human Services. We know who was driving it.
It's on your mind.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a Freudian slip. But anyway, the point with it is, one of the things we're seeing, and as I said earlier, next to medical doctors, the two major professions are medical doctors and veterinarians that are seen as the credible spokespeople. The activists understand that. The activists are coming after the reputation of veterinarians. That's my theory. That's why I harp at Tom at. Our deal is that, look, pork producers get it. We can't run your organization. We can't run your profession. We want to be supportive of however, but you want to make any comments to that?
Yeah, I'd make a comment. It's a concern. A few weeks ago, I had a producer, a friend of mine, we were talking about antibiotic use and the respectability of veterinarians and as a profession, as individuals, and he became very animated, and he put his finger into my chest, and he said, "You guys are the point of the spear now." And that concerns me, because we do have respectability, but we have a lot at risk to lose that. And as we become, if you want to use that point of the spear concept, the activists are very aware of veterinarians. Louise Slaughter did not think up the Sunshine Act on her own. That came from somebody's playbook outside of her office. And so it's going to behoove us with this increased responsibility is this increased sense of accountability to really be the professionals that we can be and not take shortcuts. And sometimes that's a hard answer to a producer that wants to use maybe it's a feed product extra labeling. You got to learn to say no. And everything we say could be used against us.
Andy, I've got a red light. It says no time. Do I have time for closing comments? Jan, anything else, any other message you'd like to share with these folks?
With the VFD, I guess when it's implemented, I think there's going to be some negatives and positives, but you're the point of the spear. I hope, or will it be, where the veterinarian's going to be looked at as the policeman, and he's going to have to blow the whistle on one of his clients who's done something wrong or used something. So I think that'll be a challenge for the veterinarian community in that token. So that all has to be walked through and make sure that, once again, the education is such that our producers do the right things. We have a lot of small family farms, but some are pretty good sized. They have on-farm feed mills. I think it's going to be a real learning curve for those guys. Our commercial feed mill, we reconcile all of our drugs, weigh them in and out. There's going to be a lot of those producers that have to get VFDs to use whatever antibiotics in their feed mills. They're going to need a lot of coaching, and to run those feed mills under those good manufacturing practices, and it could be pretty interesting. That's going to be you guys' challenge.
Bob, any closing comments?
So I already told you I'm the eternal optimist. So I think that we've got some high ground that we need to retake. You all are already on the high ground, but if it's being challenged, then be proactive about it and go out and keep the high ground, that you have. Us in production agriculture, we got a ways to go, but I am as confident as I've ever been that people just want to know that you care, and if you talk to them and you tell them why you're doing the things that you're doing, the smart people understand.
Tom, any last words of advice?
I just want to say is I get exposed to other areas of veterinary medicine, small animal people, bovine guys. I'm glad I work for who I do, because I think swine veterinarians and pork producers really are the best people to work for. I mean, I see other fights going on, loss of veterinary control in certain segments of veterinary medicine, production of meat. That's bad. And I think that as a profession and as an industry, we stand to be probably better positioned than a lot of other industries as we go through this change here January 1st, 2017.
Thank the audience. Thanks, Ceva, for putting this together. We really appreciate it. I've been humbled to be up here with these three folks. Tremendous respect for them. I'm humbled to work with the veterinary community because, as you can probably tell, you're a critical and important factor to the success of the U.S. pork industry. So with that, I'll leave you with the words of Scott Carpenter, who was the first suborbital astronaut, went to space. He was doing a tour for the Redstone rocket, get the old team revved up, and suddenly found himself in front of 3,000 people in Southern California at the Redstone rocket factory, and he had no idea what he was going to say, and suddenly it struck him. He was going to be going into space on a rocket that had been built on low bid. So he came up with the immortal words, and I share them with you. Do good work. Thank you.